Hello everybody, welcome back to the ranch. Dr. Uptown here. We're back again today with the Beretta 92FS, and we got our parts in from Cylinder and Slide to do the low mass trigger setup on it. So what we're going to start off with is just the standard field strip on the 92 and work our way from there. First thing we'll do is go ahead and remove the slide, set it out of the way. We don't need that anymore for what we're going to be doing here. And we'll just move right on into our grip removal. That'll be next step in the game. Once we've got these grips removed, then we're going to take out some of the parts. I'm not going to do a complete breakdown on this frame. We're just going to basically get down to where we need to go to remove the and change out the parts that we need to, which would be the hammer, the sear spring itself, and the mainspring. So we will have to take this frame about 90% apart, but there will be a few parts that if you're going to do a detailed strip that you would still need to remove. But for the purposes of our exercise here, we're just going to remove what we need to remove. So one of the first things we're going to do is go ahead and pull this transfer bar out. It is held in place basically just by friction, but it does have a small spring on it, so we'll go ahead and remove that small spring and work our way from there. Somewhere over the rainbow, there they are, I have a small pair of pliers. So we'll just go ahead and pull that spring down and out, set it aside. Now, there is another spring that this transfer bar attaches to, and it is right down in here, and it goes over the top of this portion of the pin that you'll see, and you'll notice that it does have, if you can see that, it does have a small groove in the pin area right there that spring locks into. Basically, the only thing that's particularly important about that for right now is the fact that when we go to put this back in, we will need to pull that spring back as we're pushing that transfer bar in. So with that removed, we can go ahead and remove the hammer pin, which will allow us to remove the hammer. And then take out the associated transfer bar and maybe the mainspring. So we'll set that mainspring aside, set the hammer aside. Transfer bar we'll need, obviously the big pin we'll need. And I did notice the pin came out of the mainspring housing once we got the tension off, and basically this constitutes the mainspring housing. And that pin would go right there. You'll see that as we get ready to reassemble it. The other pin we're going to knock out is right here, and we'll go ahead and knock that out. What that holds in place is that holds in place the sear, which you may or may not be able to see right here, and it removes the pin. So let's get our punch set here. And we'll see about knocking that pin out. which we were able to do. That drops our sear and our sear spring out. And like I say, we'll set those aside. Those are parts we won't need either. So that's got us broke down as far as we're going to go for right now. Go ahead and suck you in here a little bit. As you can see now, we've got a void where the sear goes, and then of course the hammer goes right in here. Like I say, there are a few other small parts that we could go ahead and remove, as well as the trigger itself, but those aren't particularly important to us in this exercise. So we're going to leave those pins in place, or leave the pins and all the associated parts that go with them in place. So we'll be ready to go ahead and start installing our new parts. The first thing we're going to start off with is the sear and the sear spring. Keep our new parts separated from our old parts. And the sear will drop into place easy enough. What I've found difficult to do with this, as far as the reassembly, is getting the spring in the proper location. And the previous disassembly that I've seen of this involved a Beretta armor, and he had a tool. I don't know if it was specifically designed or not for this exercise, but he had a tool that allowed him to take this spring and set it into the location that it needed to be in while set this spring, and it just was it was an arm, but it was specifically designed to hold the spring. And what I have run into is, since I don't have that particular tool, sometimes it can be kind of interesting to get the spring into the location that it needs to be in. So we'll fiddle with this for just a minute and see if we can get it to drop into place. Just say, sometimes this can be a bit fiddly. Because what wants to happen is that spring, as you get it in there to get it into the groove, it wants to flop over on its side. So like I say, we'll monkey with this and try to get everything into the location that it needs to be into. The spring from cylinder and slide is it's a much heavier wired spring than the spring from Beretta. Okay, we did get that into location. Now we will attempt to get our punch through and reinsert the pin. Alright, I don't know if we'll be able to get a real good close-up of this or not. We'll give it a shot and see how it turns out later on. What you can see, if you can see it, is the sear spring sits in this small groove right here, and then the sear sits back in here a little bit further. Like I say, I don't know that you can see that very well down in there or not, but this is the sear and then the sear spring. The pin goes through both the spring and the hole in the sear itself. But what that does is that spring loads the sear. Now, next thing we'll do is go ahead and install the hammer. This is the hammer transfer bar, which transfers the mainspring pressure to the hammer itself, and that piece drops in there simply like that, followed by the hammer, which goes into location, and then the hammer pin goes in on the back side, and that locks that into place. Next, we will go ahead and install the mainspring and the mainspring housing, which also has a lanyard loop. On this particular pistol, that mainspring and the lanyard loop are plastic. And that's what holds that in place. Next we'll be replacing the transfer bar back into location. One thing I will go ahead and do first is I will go ahead and put this spring for that transfer bar into place. Goes into the small hole in the frame there. And like I say, there is a tiny little spring that we have to move here, and I've got just the tool to do that with. It's not the proper tool to do it with, but it has worked pretty well for me in the past. This actually isn't the right one. The one I need is got a little curve in it. And we'll find it here in a second. It's just a little dental pick type tool. There it is. And what it does is it allows me to grab a hold of that spring and hold it. Just compress the spring up by pulling the trigger and grabbing a hold of that, pulling that transfer bar out until I can move that all the way in, and then it will lock in place on the muzzle side of where that pin is inserted in there. Once I've got that in place, then I just take my transfer bar spring, and there is a small groove here in the frame that spring will drop down into, and there is a very small groove in the transfer bar that the upper portion of that spring will move into. Now, just checking it in double action. Don't want to dry fire against the frame, but it seems to be working well. So what we'll go ahead and do now is reassemble the slide onto the frame so that we can go ahead and cycle a couple of dry fire cycles through it. Oh, this has a magazine. I forget about that. Well, we may have a problem. Double action, it's fine. But we're not firing in single action. Okay, well, that's interesting development. We will have to see what's up with that. Double action, it's fine. Okay, well, I guess it's back to the drawing board to look at it a little closer and see if we can figure out what's going on.